The pain was cruel, but no matter. I must not lose any time. He might come back at any moment. So I limped on 3 legs to the other end of the hall, where there was a dark little stairway leading up into a garret, where old boxes and such things were kept, as I had heard say, and where people seldom went. I managed to climb up there, then I searched my way through the dark among the piles of things, and hid in the secretest place I could find. It was foolish to be afraid there, yet still I was, so afraid that I held in and hardly even whimpered, though it would have been such a comfort to whimper, because that eases the pain, you know. But I could lick my leg, and that did some good. For half an hour there was a commotion downstairs, and shoutings, and rushing footsteps, and then there was quiet again. Quiet for some minutes, and that was grateful to my spirit, for then my fears began to go down. And fears are worse than pains, oh, much worse. Then came a sound that froze me. They were calling me by name, hunting for me. It was muffled by a distance, but that could not take the terror out of it, and it was the most dreadful sound to me that I had ever heard. It went all about, everywhere, down there, along the halls, through the rooms, in both stories, and in the basement and the cellar, then outside, and farther away, then back, and all about the house again, and I thought it would never, never stop. But at last it did, hours and hours after the vague twilight of the garret had long ago been blotted out by black darkness. Then in that blessed stillness my terrors fell little by little away, and I was at peace and slept. It was a good rest I had, but I woke before the twilight had come again. I was feeling fairly comfortable, and I could think out a plan now. I made a very good one, which was to creep down, all the way down the back stairs, and hide behind the cellar door, and slip out and escape when the iceman came at dawn, while he was inside filling the refrigerator. Then I would hide all day, and start on my journey when night came. My journey to, well, anywhere where they would not know and betray me to the master. I was feeling almost cheerful now. Then suddenly I thought, why, what would life be without my puppy? That was despair. There was no plan for me. I saw that. I must stay where I was. Stay and wait and take what might come. It was not my affair. That was what life is. My mother had said it. Then the calling began again. All my sorrows came back. I said to myself, the master will never forgive. I did not know what I had done to make him so bitter and so unforgiving. Yet I judged it was something a dog could not understand, but which was clear to a man, and dreadful. They called and called, days and nights, it seemed to me, so long that the hunger and thirst near drove me mad, and I recognized that I was getting very weak. When you are this way, you sleep a great deal, and I did. Once I awoke in an awful fright. It seemed to me that the calling was right there in the garret, and so it was. It was Sadie's voice, and she was crying. My name was falling from her lips all broken, poor thing, and I could not believe my ears for the joy of it when I heard her say, "Come back to us! Oh, come back to us, and forgive! It is all so sad without our—" I broke in with such a great little yelp, and the next moment Sadie was plunging and stumbling through the darkness and the lumber, and shouting for the family to hear, "She's found! She's found!" The days that followed, well, they were wonderful. The mother and Sadie and the servants, why, they just seemed to worship me. They couldn't seem to make me a bed that was fine enough. And as for food, they couldn't be satisfied with anything but game and delicacies that were out of season. And every day the friends and neighbors flocked in to hear about my heroism. That was the name they called it, and it means agriculture. I remember my mother pulling it on a kennel once, and explaining it that way, but didn't say what agriculture was, except that it was synonymous with intramural incandescence. And a dozen times a day Mrs. Gray and Sadie would tell the tale to newcomers, and say I risked my life to save the babies, and both of us had burns to prove it. And then the company would pass me around and pet me, and exclaim about me, and you could see the pride in the eyes of Sadie and her mother. and when the people wanted to know what made me limp, they looked ashamed and changed the subject. And sometimes when people hunted them this way and that way with questions about it, it looked to me as if they were going to cry. And this was not all the glory. No, the master's friends came, a whole 20 of the most distinguished people, and had me in the laboratory, and discussed me as if I was a kind of discovery. And some of them said it was wonderful in a dumb beast, the finest exhibition of instinct they could call to mind. But the master said with vehemence, "It's far above instinct, it's reason, and many a man privileged to be saved and go with you and me to a better world by right of its possession has less of it than this poor silly quadruped that's foreordained to perish." And then he laughed and said, "Why, look at me, I'm a sarcasm. Bless you, with all my grand intelligence, the only thing I inferred was that the dog had gone mad and was destroying the child, whereas but for the beast's intelligence, its reason, I tell you, the child would have perished." They disputed and disputed, and I was the very centre of the subject of it all, and I wished my mother could know that this grand honour had come to me. It would have made her proud. Then they discussed optics, as they called it, and whether a certain injury to the brain would produce blindness or not, but they could not agree about it, and they said they must test it by experiment by and by. And next they discussed plants, and that interested me, because in the summer Sadie and I had planted seeds. I helped her dig the holes, you know, and after days and days a little shrub or flower came up there, and it was a wonder how that could happen. But it did, and I wished I could talk. I would have told those people about it and shown them how much I knew, and been all alive with the subject. But I didn't care for the optics. It was dull, and when they came back to it again, it bored me, and I went to sleep. Pretty soon it was spring and sunny, and pleasant and lovely, and the sweet mother and the children patted me and the puppy good-bye, and went away on a journey and a visit to their kin, and the master wasn't any company for us, but we played together and had good times. And the servants were kind and friendly, so we got along quite happily and counted the days and waited for the family. And one day those men came again and said, "Now for the test," and they took the puppy to the laboratory, and I limped three-leggedly along too, feeling proud, for any attention shown to the puppy was a pleasure to me, of course. They discussed and experimented, and then suddenly the puppy shrieked, and they set him on the floor, and he went staggering around, with his head all bloody, and the master clapped his hands and shouted, "There, I've won! Confess it! He's as blind as a bat!" And they all said, "It's so. You've proven your theory, and suffering humanity owes you a great debt from henceforth." And they crowded around him and wrung his hand cordially and thankfully, and praised him. But I hardly saw or heard these things, for I ran at once to my little darling, and snuggled close to it where it lay, and licked the blood and put its head against mine, whimpering softly. And I knew in my heart it was a comfort to it in its pain and trouble, to feel its mother's touch, though it could not see me. Then it dropped down presently, and its little velvet nose rested upon the floor, and it was still, and did not move any more. Soon the master stopped discussing a moment, and rang in the footman and said, "Bury it in the far corner of the garden," and then went on with the discussion, and I trotted after the footman, very happy and grateful, for I knew the puppy was out of its pain now, because it was asleep. We went far down the garden to the farthest end, where the children and the nurse and the puppy and I used to play in the summer in the shade of a great elm. And there the footman dug a hole, and I saw he was going to plant the puppy, and I was glad, because it would grow and come up a fine handsome dog, like Robin Adair, and be a beautiful surprise for the family when they came home. So I tried to help him dig, but my lame leg was no good, being stiff, you know, and you have to have two or it is no use. When the footman had finished and covered little Robin up, he patted my head, and there were tears in his eyes, and he said, "Poor little doggie, you saved his child." I have watched 2 whole weeks, and he doesn't come up. This last week a fright has been stealing upon me. I think there is something terrible about this. I do not know what it is, but the fear makes me sick, and I cannot eat, though the servants bring me the best of food. And they pet me so, and even come in the night and cry and say, 'Poor doggie, do give it up and come home. Don't break our hearts.' And all this terrifies me the more, and makes me sure something has happened. And I am so weak. Since yesterday I cannot stand on my feet any more. And within this hour the servants, looking toward the sun where it was sinking out of sight, and the night chill coming on, said things I could not understand, but they carried something cold to my heart. Those poor creatures, they do not suspect. They will come home in the morning and eagerly ask for the little doggie that did the brave deed. And who of us will be strong enough to say the truth to them? The humble little friend is gone where go the beasts that perish.